From 1 star to 5 stars, here are 3 fantasy series where the sequel was way better than book 1. What is up, book babes? We are here filming in the wild to change up the scenery a little bit. Now, I'm gonna try to convince you to pick up these fantasy series despite the first book being pretty freaking bad. I think the sequels are so incredible and just mind-blowing that it is definitely worth pushing through. Starting with Ordinary Monster. This book I ended up giving 3 stars just because the ending did capture me a little bit, and you're gonna see that as a running theme. But for the most part, our MC Joan was insufferable. It didn't have as much magic or world building as I would have loved. In fact, the main thing I liked about that series was actually the world building, so I was really disappointed that we didn't really see much of that in book 1. So I gave Only a Monster 3 stars. I really wanted to give it 2, but because that ending was just a moment in itself, I decided I would pick up the sequel, and oh lord, the author Vanessa clearly has done her homework. She hears back from readers, the pacing, the world building, the characters, the themes. I was freaking won over so hard in that book. I wanted to give it 5 stars. It was fast, it was interesting, it was heartbreaking, the characters, I just freaking loved it so much that I am so glad I ended up picking up Only a Monster and continuing on to Never a Hero. It was just that freaking good. This YA fantasy is definitely something you have to try if you love fantasy. I ended up DMing the author, thanking her for her growth, for the themes that you find in Never a Hero. It's just so wonderful, and I am so excited for book 3. This next one might be a little bit difficult for me to convince you to read. We're going to be talking about The Cadence duology. This is written by Rebecca Ross, and if you're in the fantasy space or even in the romance space, you might see Divine Rivals was a huge hit last year. People adored that romance so much, and so that is the same author of A River Enchanted and A Fire Endless. Now, the sequel was so good that I had to feature it in my top 2023 books, and I think that would be my top fiction read of the year because it was so stunning, it was gorgeous, it was amazing, the characters, the atmosphere. But A River Enchanted was really difficult for me to get through, and the only reason I did is because I ended up pairing the book with the audiobook. It was so insanely slow. I literally mean like 95% of the book. It is just ridiculously slow, and it was not for me. It wasn't even that it was too lyrical or anything like that. The pacing, the storyline, the arc was just non-existent, and I just felt like we were literally going in circles. Like, you're just showing me the same patch of land over and over again. I could not get into it as much as I wanted to, and I think I kept wishing it would get better because I am so bad at DNFing books, and I just pushed right through it. Now, anytime a friend mentions wanting to read that book, I mean, I highly recommend the series because the sequel is that worth it. I suggest you actually do the audiobook for A River Enchanted. If the first 3 chapters can't capture you, or the first 5, I would say audiobook is the way to go because it pretty much stays the same throughout the whole book. The first 5 chapters or even 3 chapters are the same throughout the whole thing, but it's those reveals at the end of A River Enchanted that convinced me enough to pick up A Fire Endless. The sequel is so worth it. I want you to push past the difficulty and the pacing of book 1. Fire Endless was a whole other level. I was like, this is the Rebecca Ross that I saw in Divine Rivals, but in an adult fantasy series. The Scottish lore, the atmosphere, the magic, the gods, it's just so magical. That book is so magical. I loved it so much. I'm so happy I own A Fire Endless, and I'm still looking for a copy of A River Enchanted because even though I didn't love A River Enchanted and I sincerely wanted to give it 2 stars, I want it. I want that set. It is so good. By the way, if you clicked into this video, I'm assuming you're a big fantasy lover like I am. So if you are enjoying this, I hope you hit that subscribe button, stick around, and keep hanging out with me. Now, if you've been on this channel for a while, you know that I do not shy away from saying that A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas was absolute trash. I sincerely do believe that on my Goodreads it is at 1 star or maybe 2 because again, that little piece of that ending Rhysand kind of saved the day, but the worm, the fighting, the dialogue, the inner monologue was insane to me. I could not fathom how this book became so popular and how it's actually popular enough for people to keep reading, because I saw this book and I was like, this is no, like there's no way this is epic fantasy. fantasy. But everyone kept saying that A Court of Mist and Fury, the second book in the series, would make it all worth it and it would be 1,000 times better. And let me just say, that's so true. Court of Mist and Fury is 1,000 times better. I literally went from 2 stars to 5 stars because A Court of Mist and Fury made me cry. It made me feel. It was so adventurous. It was so magical. The world building, the characters were insanely dimensional, and that is one of my top favorite things to find in a book are dimensional characters. I love them so much. When you can really dissect a character profoundly or bring them into the real world and put them out here, and you know as a reader how they would interact in our world or any other situation, I freaking love that death. The tragedies, the backstories, there's just so much to say about Sarah J. Maas's characters in A Court of Thorns and Roses, the series as a whole, but I would have to say the sequel still stands super strong. I think it's still a top favorite. Even amongst the 5 books total, that is a top read. So I would say A Court of Thorns and Roses was really, really poor. I have no idea how this is honestly written by the same author because the writing style and depth are so freaking different, but the sequel is just so good that I would say it is definitely worth picking up just for that epic fantasy. And it definitely made me realize, okay, now I know why SJM is considered a big fantasy writer, a big fantasy figure for fantasy readers, because it is really that good. And I will never stop praising chapter 54 for really making me cry, making me feel that soup, y'all. That soup, I cannot get over that chapter. All of these books are books that I would actually reread, you know? I'm talking about Never a Hero, A Fire Endless, and A Court of Mist and Fury. And even talking about it here on camera to you all 3 books are books that were just so good and really filled up my cup, my fantasy loving self cup. Now you'll have to let me know if there's a series that actually gets better and better over time. I'm definitely going through all my books and seeing what series changed my mind, second book and third book and whatever, because much like people, I find it really difficult to give up on books. I don't know if I just think they might get better and I just need to really force myself to finish something, but maybe 2024 or 2025 will be the year that I DNF a lot faster because of instances like this where the sequel just made it so worth it. It's so hard for me to just drop a book, but I need to do it way more often. There are a ton of amazing series out there. I had a lot of fun reflecting back on series that changed my mind because these have become top favorite books of mine, and I would have never guessed it after reading book 1. If you're enjoying this type of series, make sure you hit that like button so I go through my books even more and figure out other series to make for you all. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!